Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar on testing mainframe environments using open source tools. Firstly, I'd like to thank in advance our host, Roger Abelenda, the technical director at Abstracta, who will take over in a minute and lead the presentation. But before I begin, and I know some people are still arriving, so just a few quick announcements. The webinar is being recorded, so everyone will be sent the full recording, hopefully tomorrow, if not in the coming days. There is going to be time for questions, so you should see a tab, a panel that says questions, where you can type in your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll get to a Q&A at the end. Please keep the questions as much on topic, and we'll try to get to as many as we can through the webinar, and whatever we can't answer, we'll try and get back to as well in the upcoming days. Last thing, at the end of today's webinar, you'll see a very short survey pop up. Please take the 10-15 seconds to just answer that. We'd appreciate it. It provides feedback for our webinars, and also talks for gives us topics for, if you can suggest topics for upcoming webinars, and any other additional questions you are welcome to ask there. So before I turn over to Roger, as you know, that the webinar is on testing mainframe environments using open source tools. So you know, it's nothing new that the world of developers is filled with discussions about how to be agile, how to implement shift left methodologies, and often the mainframe and server testers are often left behind in these conversations because they've been in the past largely dependent on expensive legacy tools or performance engineers in centers that are having to do the work. But there's a lot of desire and growth for modernizing mainframe apps, and they're integral to digital transformation. And you know, as you'll see soon with Roger, it's possible to grow mainframe value and be able to do it within the open source community. And what are the benefits with that, and how you'll do that is obviously Roger will get into it in more detail. But you know, it provides high quality, cost effective, high velocity, and the fact that if it's open source based, you're able to integrate with other tools like Jenkins, TeamCity, Bamboo, with the whole continuous integration, and really automate your entire agile testing process. So I'm sure you're sick of me, and I'd like to hand it over to Roger, who will really take us into more depth. And like I said, we'll be taking questions at the end. Thank you all for joining. And Roger, I'm making you the presenter now. And thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Hello, welcome. So let's start. So the idea to present in this webinar is we are going to first create a mainframe application test with JMeter. We are going to do a functional test, and then we are going to implement some performance tests with that. Then after we have a test that tests our mainframe application, we are going to run it at scale by using BlazeMeter, which allows us to do that. I will show you this, and I will provide some tips and advices on that, piece of advices on that. Then we are going to review some common issues when testing mainframe applications and when implementing some client applications that use the mainframe application as a service. And we will provide a solution for those usual issues. And finally, as Emma mentioned, we are going to give some minutes for questions and answering. And finally, in the last slide, we are going to provide you with some links to the resources that we are using in this webinar. So let's go on. So go to action. Let's start creating a test for a mainframe application. So before starting creating the actual test with JMeter, we are going to start a terminal emulator. XTN5250 is the one that I'm going to use. It's an open source tool that you can use to connect to a mainframe application. And now it's asking me to enter the IP and the port of the mainframe applications. I'm going to provide an IP and the port. In this case, it's 2323. By default, the mainframe application is just 23, but this mainframe application is particular, uses a different port. So we connect. And in this application, we can see that we are presented in the welcome screen with a screen to log into the application. So we are going to log in, test user, test password, and we are presented with a menu screen where we can select an option and another menu will appear. So this is the application that we are interested or we are going to demo in this webinar. And this is what I will try to replicate in JMeter, or I will replicate in JMeter actually, and we'll test functioning. I will just test the login because with that you get the basics for testing any part of a Mainframe application. I'm not going to test the menu, all those things. So I'm going to close this. We are going to start with JMeter, and I'm going to restart the emulator so we can go step by step in the same process, and you can see how each of the steps in the emulator is mapped to a JMeter. So in JMeter, the first thing that we are going to do is to add a thread group. It's the usual thing. You add a thread group, you specify the number of users or concurrent connections that you're going to use. We are going to just use one for the time being, and later on we will change. You can also specify how many times each thread will iterate, so how many times the test that we implement is going to be run in each of the thread or in each of the concurrent connections. And now we want to connect to the mainframe application as we do here by entering the IP, right? We want to do this same thing on JMeter. So for doing that, we are going to add a config element, rt-config, and here we can specify the server IP and the port. We're going to change the port, as I mentioned to you. You can also change the protocol. Currently, we only support TN52 and 3270. We're going to use this one. You can also choose the terminal type for the particular application you want to test. And you can also use the socket security layer that you want to use. It may be none. In this case, we are going to use none because this application does not have any security layer. But you can also specify SSLv3, TLS, or specify a connection timeout. And now this is just a config element, so we need now to do an actual interaction with the server. To do that, we are going to add a sampler. The sampler is the way to interact with the mainframe application. So by choosing RT sampler, we can specify here 3 modes of action for the sampler: connect, send keys, and disconnect. The connect will allow us to connect to the server. This is not actually mandatory for doing a test with a mainframe application, but I'm going to implement it in this case so we can map step by step the scenarios and we can see the welcome screen in JMeter. But I will show you later on that this connection is not required since the plugin automatically connects and disconnects for each iteration of a thread of a user. So you can also, in general, you will use this one, the send keys, which allows you to send input to a particular screen on the mainframe application. And finally, you can explicitly disconnect from the mainframe application in a given sampler. I say explicitly because, as I previously mentioned, the plugin will automatically connect and disconnect in each iteration. So it's not mandatory either to do disconnect. The plugin will handle it by default. But for the time being, we'll just connect. In the connect here, you can specify different conditions to wait for, because since the mainframe applications, the mainframe protocols are asynchronous, you need some way of waiting for some event before going to the next sampler and to have a flow as a user will do in the terminal emulator. So here you can wait for sync, which will basically wait for a screen and for the keyboard to be unlocked from the mainframe applications. I say unlocked because the mainframe applications might lock the keyboard or input while it's processing the request that you just sent. This is usually just checked by default. You can also wait for the cursor, for the position on the screen. For example, here in the screen, we see that the cursor is here and it's in the position in the row 6 and the column 53rd. And you can specify here to wait for the cursor to be in a certain position because the cursor might be moving while the Mainframe application is processing, or you want to wait for the cursor to be at central position. Additionally, you can wait for the Mainframe application to be silent for a certain period of time. To be silent means that the Mainframe application does not send packets to the JMeter or to the user in the given period of time. So in this case, we will be waiting for 1 second for the Mainframe application to not send packets during 1 second. And finally, you can also wait for a given text to be present on the screen. So the plugin will wait for that particular text. You can use a regular expression here and wait for that particular text to be in the screen. You can also specify a search area to narrow down the area of the screen that you are going to use for searching. This will make things more performant than if you just search for a smaller area. And it also makes it more specific because the same text may be duplicated in several parts of the screen and you may be interested only in some part of the screen. Okay, so for the time being, we are going just to do a sync, which is the default one, and we are going to add the usual view resource tree, which allows us to see each sample that is recorded by the sampler and allows to see what the interaction looks like. So now we hit play. Okay, we are going to save this test plan. I'm going to use RTE test, save, and now it's running. So now it connects. Here we can see the usual JMeter statistics like the connection time, the load time, and the number of bytes. And if we go to the response here, we can see the same screen that we are presented here in the terminal emulator on JMeter. So you can use any assertion and post-processor on this response body and extract information or assert for that some particular text on the screen. I will show you later on how to use a post-processor, for example, to extract some part of the screen. Additionally to that, you get some additional response headers, which provides additional data, metadata on the Mainframe application screen or status. So in this case, we see the input inhibitor is false, so it means that we can send some input to the Mainframe application. If it were true, we wouldn't be able to do that, and the screen will be locked. And the other metadata that we are seeing now is the cursor position, which says the same as here, 6 and 53. So we know that the cursor is at that position. So now we are going to do the next step, that is going to add to specify the fields here in the Mainframe application. For doing that, we are going to do add another sampler. Let's put some names here because otherwise it gets a little messy. This is the connect, and this is the login. Okay, so we specify login, and now we are going to specify the fields here. So we now add a field. We are in the field that we want to add is in position 6 and 53, and test user, right? Okay, so let's do that. 6, 53. Let's expand this a little more. Test user. And we are going to also specify the other field, that is test password. You don't see it right now, but it's that one. I hit enter, so let's do that as well. 7, 53 is the second field, and test password. We can now choose the attention key, that the one I use is enter. The enter is the default one, but you can specify any of these after sending some input. And you can also specify the same wait conditions as in connect for waiting for the particular event. So now we are going to clean our last execution and rerun it, and it should present us with this screen, that is the second one, and we should get a successful login, right? So we have the connect, and then we have the login. In the login, we see the same screen as the one that we are expecting. So the test is working, right? Otherwise, it would get red here. But some other information that we get in this login screen is that we, for example, see that Now there is an additional flag that says sound alarm true. This means that an alarm has sounded, and this is a particular functionality of the Mainframe application protocol that the Mainframe application may sound an alarm. You are not able to hear it now in the terminal emulator that I'm using it, but in general, if you use a terminal emulator, it will produce a sound when hitting this screen. This is particular for this Mainframe application, but many others may use that. So you are presented with that as well, so you can assert and do operations on that. So now that we have a functional test of this, we can, for example, let's add an extractor, a post-processor, and you can use any of these post-processor extractors on the screen or in the headers. In general, you will be using these three: boundary extractor, regular expression, and JSR 22.3. You might also use assertions. For example, I don't know, the response assertion might be the one that you may use in a screen, but for the sake of this presentation, I am going to use the regular expression extractor, and I will extract from the login screen this system field that shows here. So later on, if you want, for the sake of this demo, I will just extract it and not use it, but later on you can use it in other samplers and use that value as an input of other screens on the Mainframe application, for example. Okay, so let's do a regular expression extractor on the main sample only. Okay, the body. Let's create a variable. Let's call it sys. And the regular expression has to be something like system colon some spaces, and then we get some words, alphanumeric characters. That is the part where we are interested in, and we want to extract this first group, so we specify here 1, and that's basically it. We are going to add a debugging sampler, so we can see the variable debugging sampler here. Okay, and we are going to rerun this, so you can see that the extractor is properly working. As with this extractor, you can use any of the others as previously mentioned, and you can use assertions. Okay, if we go here to the, here you can see that sys is test sys. So we have successfully extracted this field from the screen. Some piece of advice when using assertions, in particular text assertions on the screen, prefer on using when, for example, if we want to assert that the screen has this main menu here, instead of doing that, prefer on using wait text with menu here. I say this because take into consideration that Mainframe applications, the protocol that it's used is asynchronous. So if you use just the this sync waveform, the Mainframe application may send you a screen and block the keyboard, but it may still, after that, send you some additional part of the screen. So it might, when the block is, when the screen is unlocked, when this condition is fulfilled, it might yet not have the screen that you are going to search, so the assertion may fail. And to avoid that, it's preferable to wait for that particular text that you are waiting on the screen and specify a proper timeout here. So if that part of the screen doesn't appear, it will time out and the assertion will not fail. So your test will be more robust than using the assertion. So in general, prefer using the wait if you can, instead of using assertions, but assertions are helpful as well in some other scenarios. Okay, so now I'm going to remove this. Okay, we remove this one as well. And now we are going to run some iterations of this. Okay, we are going to run, for example, 10 concurrent users, and we will run it for 10 minutes. So loop doesn't matter. Sorry, 10 seconds. Okay, let's run it for 10 seconds and see, and let's add also some additional reporter that allows us to see some general statistics. So what we are going to run now is a performance test. We are going to switch from a functional test, just testing one screen, one iteration with one user, and we will run it with several ones and get statistics on that. Okay, so let's do that. And let's also remove the connect because we didn't, as I mentioned to you, the connect is not required. And by doing that, I show you that it's not actually required. So we do that, we go here. We see that several logins are done at the same time, and it keeps logging in until the 10 seconds are reached. Here in the summary report, we can see the general statistics. So we can see the number of samplers, the average response time, which includes the connection time in this case, because the login automatically connects and disconnects. And you can see some maximum response time and standard deviations on it. By doing this, you are now testing performance test, doing a performance test, evaluating the performance of your mainframe application. Oh, sorry, mainframe application from JMeter, which is awesome. But we are limited by doing that to this machine I'm using from my local host. I can impose as much load as my local resources can. So it would be nice to have an easy way to run this at scale. I mean, to run it from several machines and scale as much as I want to be able to impose the load I want on the mainframe application. Okay, so let's do that. For that, we are going to save this test plan. And we are going to go to BlazeMeter and log in here in BlazeMeter. And we are going to create a test, performance test, and we can choose here just the test I selected, the JMeter. You just upload it, you don't have to change anything. You can specify here the users, which override the default JMeter users I set. But for example, here I can say, I don't know, 50 users, 56, whatever. You can specify the duration, the number of minutes that the performance test will run. We specify 5 minutes, a ramp up period of 1 minute. Okay, so the users go in a ramp up. Then you can specify here, for example, how many users or concurrent connections you want to do from each of the engines. An engine is a node, a server that is generating load. So for example, I want to do 25 or 30. Okay, so I'm going to use 2 engines. And you can also specify different clusters from where to generate load. For example, I can add another one here. I use US West and do a 50-50 of load between the servers in those clusters, regions. I'm not going to do that right now. And you can also specify failure criteria, which are really helpful. I mean, by doing that, like in JMeter, you don't have any way of specifying, okay, if the response time in average is, or in the 90 percentile is more than 10 seconds, then the test will fail. There is no easy way on JMeter to do that. So here is really easy to do because you can specify response time percentile 90, less than, I don't know, 10 seconds, okay? And that we will talk more about that while the test runs because it takes some time. You can specify additional features that BlazeMeter has, really helpful, but I'm not going to use them now. And you can run, it will provide a message and launch servers. So now it's spinning up 2 engines, 2 servers to generate load to the mainframe application that I'm testing. This usually takes some minutes to set up, but while we do that, let's talk more about the BlazeMeter benefits. I mean, I just mentioned that one of the features I mentioned is the failure criteria. That failure criteria allows us to easily include in our, if you have a continuous integration with some continuous delivery or continuous deployment pipeline, that you run your performance test continually, but this means that for each change you do in your mainframe application or in your client application, if for each change you do, you can spin or run a performance test and compare the performance or the response time of the application with a given threshold. When that performance is not the expected one, for example, the response time goes above 10 seconds or whatever, the test will fail, and this will make the pipeline fail. So you will get an instant notification on the degradation of the mainframe application performance, which is what we would expect by running performance tests on continuous deployment, right? So this really eases that. By using BlazeMeter, you can ease a lot continuous integration and including the performance testing in that pipeline. An additional tool that BlazeMeter provides that is open source. BlazeMeter is not open source, it's a service that you can use for free, but you have to pay if you want to use several engines. But another tool that BlazeMeter provides is an open source tool that is called Taurus. Taurus allows us to use all those failure criteria that I mentioned to you, and you can use it from the continuous pipeline. So it's really helpful tool. I'm not going to present it here because of the time, and I think the BlazeMeter is the simplest one and the most helpful one. And additionally, it provides some statistics that Taurus does not provide by default. So this is taking some time, so I'm going to just show you how a previous test looks like after you run it. Well, in a few minutes we will go back to this test and I will show you how it's managed. Okay, so this is the result of BlazeMeter. It's like great dashboard that simplifies a lot the visualization and analysis of the data. You get the users, you get the load, you get the number of hits, the response time. It's really helpful, the average response time. If you go here in timeline report, you can see here the number of hits, the response time as well, and you see these variations, which are really nice to tracing issues. You can also check, for example, the application, the server. You can get different statistics on the server that is used to generate the load. So you can see with this if you need more servers or you need to add additional servers to reach the load that you want to achieve on your Mainframe application. So here, for example, I'm using 2 engines, and I can see the statistic of those 2 engines, that the network is a little high and the connections is, but the CPU and memory is low. So we are good for this Mainframe application with the load that we want to post with these 2 engines. Well, you can also see some statistics on errors. I don't have any errors in this run. And you can get also additional logs. You can download this zip, which contains a lot of information from JMeter. And you can also see the BlazeMeter log, which is basically the Taurus output, which gets you these nice statistics. Okay, so with that, let's see what is the status. Okay, this is still running, so we will just skip this for the time being. It will take some minutes, but again. So what we have achieved so far. Okay, so far we have used many open source tools like JMeter, the emulator. We have run function and performance tests of Mainframe applications with open source tools, which are free. You can use them. You don't have to pay a thing for that. And we have also run at scale on the cloud very easily, very powerful feature that allows us to run these tests at scale. It's not open source, but again, it's really useful. I encourage you to use them if you can. So now let's go to the next section. So aside from all this, we are going to review the general issues that you may face with Mainframe applications, and in particular, client applications using Mainframe applications as a service. And we will provide a solution for that with an open source tool. So, usual thing or usual problem that you may face when testing Mainframe applications or when using Mainframe applications is that the access to those Mainframe applications is usually hard, or it's a restricted environment which you have to set up some VPNs which are not easy to set up on a continuous integration service, or you have access to the server but only in certain period of time because the production can't be altered or performance test in a given period of time, which makes things a little complicated. And you may also not be able to generate some performance test data because that may mess up with some statistics. So mainframe applications environments are usually hard to test. Usually you may not get either a testing environment, or it might not be that easy to set up a testing environment. So this is a usual or common problem when testing mainframe applications or when testing an application that uses mainframe application. Some other issues that you may face when developing a mainframe application, a client that uses mainframe application, is that you might want to test your code locally without actually hitting production. I mean, you might want something that behaves as the mainframe application, but it's not the mainframe application because you don't want to hit the production environment, you don't have access, etc. So some other issues that you may face as well when developing client applications, you may need to reproduce some some issues that are from production. You may want to have some way to reproduce it locally, to test it several times and see that the logic that you're implementing fix that particular issue that you're facing in production. And you don't want to mess with production while doing that. You want to have a really quick feedback loop there when you are testing and trying to reproduce the issue or reproduce the issue there. So it would be nice kind of recording the behavior of the production issue and reproduce it locally and test against that behavior. Some other needs that you may face, or usually you might face, is that it might be difficult when implementing client applications to make the mainframe application to behave the way that it should behave in some particular scenario. So it would be nice for such cases to be able to modify the behavior of mainframe application and behave as expected and test our client application against that expected behavior. Even though that corner case or hard to reproduce case may be difficult to access in production, but you always want to make your client application as robust as possible. And a final issue that you may face, or final common problem, is that when implementing a delivery pipeline or continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline, or just continuous integration, you might want to test your client application against something that gives you a quick response and doesn't have to access production environment. It doesn't mean that you don't have to actually test it at some point in the delivery pipeline against production environment. But when you're delivering, when you're implementing a delivery pipeline, you usually want in the early stages to test against something that behaves as production environment, but it's not actually production environment. And later on, when you are reaching the final phases, then test with the actual production environment. So a solution for all these problems is Wireshark. Okay, what is Wireshark? Okay, Wireshark is a tool that allows you to implement what is called in testing terminology a test double. In particular, it allows you to implement virtual services, also named mods. So what does this all mean? It allows us to reproduce or to behave as a mainframe application. In particular, Wireshark is a virtual service tool which supports TCP emulation or TCP traffic emulation, and it's a stateful tool. So the usual behavior or the usual way of using Wireshark is to record some traffic between our client application or terminal emulator and the mainframe application. We record that traffic, which you can use Wireshark. It's an open source tool for capturing traffic between services, or TCP dump. There is another tool, it's widely used by sysadmins, it's a lot more popular than Wireshark. Sysadmins usually use TCP dump to trace issues between services or communications, but for the sake of this demonstration of this webinar, we are going to use Wireshark, which is more visual or easier to see. So let's mock. So as I mentioned to you, we are going to record some traffic. We are going to use Wireshark for this instance, but you can also use TCP dump if you want. We are going to start Wireshark with that recording. Wireshark allows us to import those dumps, and it will start as a service. And then we are going to use it as a virtual server. We are going to connect a terminal emulator to Wireshark and see that Wireshark behaves the same way as the Mainframe application. We are going to also use JMeter, so you are going to be able to see that in both cases it works. So let's go. So here we have the execution, and we are going to start recording. So let's stop this. Let's start Wireshark. We're going to select here the card where we want to listen. It should be this one, I think. Okay, so we filter the traffic to only get the traffic we are interested in. Okay, now it looks nice. We start the terminal emulator to record the traffic between the terminal emulator and the application. XTN, that's right. Okay, we connect to the host. Let's copy again the IP and the port. Connect to it, and we execute the general flow of the login, the flow that we want to record. Test user, test password. Okay. So we are there. We can also go to the menu. So we record this as well. We want to, and we are going to finish our recording. Just stopping the emulator, exit, and we can see here in Wireshark that we have recorded all the packets, all the traffic between our emulator, terminal emulator, and the Mainframe application. We are going to stop it. We can here select the code as and select the port and choose telnet. Okay, and we can see here all the telnet packets of the communication with all the information about that. So this looks nice. Now what we are going to do is we are going to export the packet dissections as a JSON. So we save it as RTE test JSON and hit save. Yes. Okay. So now what we are going to do is we are going to start Wireshark with this recording. So we copy this here, and here we are going to start Wireshark in port 2323. It doesn't have to match the same port as the Mainframe application. You can use another one for running the virtual service locally. You have to specify here the IP of the server, so Wireshark is able to differentiate between client packets and Mainframe and server packets, so it behaves as a server. And then you can also specify the number of concurrent connections that may be connected to this service, and the last parameter is the file that you are expecting that contains the dump. So in this case, let me recheck what was the file. RT test JSON, right? Desktop webinar RT test JSON, right? Oh, let's do this. Okay, desktop webinar, and we do that again. We can remove this because we don't need it. And we started. So now it's waiting for connections. So now what we can do is we can start the terminal emulator again, but this time, instead of connecting to the mainframe application, we can connect to our localhost wireshark, which will emulate our mainframe application. Okay, that's it. You see, test user, test password, and it's behaving exactly as the recorded application. Okay, so with this we can also, yes, let's exit. We can also test our JMeter test and use, for example, localhost. Let's change here just for running a functional test. We don't want to run a performance test. We are going to just verify that our test still works with the mock. Let's clean this up. Okay, and we run it. Hit run. And we get a login. So we get the exact same behavior as if we were hitting the actual production mainframe application, but instead using a local environment, a local machine, a mock, or a virtual service of the actual mainframe application. So what we can do with this mock application is that we can use it whenever we want. We don't need any VPN setting. We don't need we are, regardless of any restrictions of accessing production environment, we record it just once and use it every time we need it to. If we are implementing a client application, we can test as many times as we want locally and very fast. We can even tune the response times on the server to get a faster feedback when testing. Additionally to that, you can record some issue that may arise in production by recording the traffic between the terminal emulator or the client application and the mainframe application. And then you can get that dump, that recording, and reproduce it locally as many times as you want to test the client application code and to fix it. Additionally to that, you can also modify the dump. Wireshark provides you a way of getting those big TCP dump and Wireshark dumps and simplify them to have a simpler format. And you can modify the packets or the response times of those traffic, and you can reproduce some corner cases that may be hard to reproduce in production or to get in production. So by doing that, you get your client application correct for those hard to reproduce corner cases, but that may happen in production. And finally, you can use this mock or this virtual service in your early stages of the delivery pipeline to get a quick feedback if the client application is working as expected with the expected mainframe application code. Later on the pipeline, you can also use production environment, but if you use this mock in the early stages, you are assured that you get a quick feedback loop if something went wrong and is unexpected. So additional features of Wireshark, you can use it as standalone, as I did on this demo on this webinar, or you can also use it in JUnit. It provides a very simple API for starting and stopping the service embedded in the JVM of the JUnit or any JVM test that you are using. Wireshark also provides this configuration file that I previously mentioned. It's a simplified way of the dump that you can easily upload to a versioning control system, and it's really small, so it's easier to review and to version. And we are planning to implement some new goodies in the near future, so stay tuned. Okay, now go to the questions part. Sorry, Emma, will you take the lead?
Hi. Yes, I'm gonna take the lead now. I guess I'll leave you still as the presenter. I'm sure you can see the screen with the questions. Just like I said, there is a question panel, so don't forget that you can ask the questions there now. We'll try to get to as many as possible, and also to remind you that this webinar is being recorded, so we'll be sending it out to everyone who's here as well. And if you can, please take those 10 minutes, like I said at the beginning, to answer the survey that will pop up at the end. It really helps us and gives us back feedback for this webinar, all webinars, because we want to provide the most valuable webinars for you on different topics as well. And really, any feedback you have is wonderful. So let's go to some questions now. I see that there is a question. Okay. If I get this correctly, the initial connection sync up is basically for the mainframe app screen to load up. If that's the case, from all 4 options on sampler, which one is the most reliable one to use?
Okay, so the sync weight can be used in fact, it should be used in all the screens. So in general, it will be used in all screens. It doesn't have to be on Connect. It allows you to wait for the mainframe application to unblock the keyboard to present you as it is ready for another input, and it also unblocks when the screen is present. So in general, you should always, or in most of the cases, use that. The other options, the most helpful, I think, is waiting for silent and waiting for text. In particular, waiting for text allows you to wait for the screen to be in some to some part of the screen, present some particular text, which is usually the way a user will wait for the, or will know that the screen is in a given status, or a given state that is nice to start sending some additional input. So the wait for text is usually the one will allow you to better reproduce a user interaction, because it will wait for a particular text to be on the screen, and it's usually what you will do as a user. I also mentioned the silent because if the server, the mainframe application, is not sending you packets for a given period of time, it means that it's waiting for you for sending some input to it, right? So it's usually that silent wait is usually nice to add it. In any case, I think that using the sync with a wait for text should be enough in most of the cases. But I don't know if you have any other questions on that. Please ask them, and I will be happy to answer them.
Okay, great. So we have a question about Wireshark. About someone has used Wireshark to record the packets communication, saved it as a JSON, imported that JSON to Wireshark, created a mock in our mainframe application to test and do some sanity locally. So, they're asking if they should use Wireshark to record the packet communication, save it as a JSON, import it, and create a mock mainframe application so you can test and do some sanity locally rather than connecting to actual mainframe every time.
Yes, I think that the recording, I mean, the nice thing about using Wireshark is that you can get a particular traffic or a particular scenario, or record it and reproduce it as many times as you want, as while you are developing your test or developing a client application. You can use that approach. One thing that it doesn't allow you is to explore the application or explore different behaviors of the application. So in general, I will say yes. You can use that practice of recording the traffic and then start creating the test above that. But always test your test, or make sure that your test works against the production environment before actually putting that performance test to test the production environment. Does it make sense?
All right, great, thanks. We have a few questions asking about the roadmap, if there's any RT protocol versions, or what is the roadmap for if there's anything specific planned, if you can talk about that.
Yeah, we are planning to add some additional protocols in the near future. We are also planning to add some nice feature that will allow us to simplify a lot the interaction or the way we create test plans with JMeter. I don't want to give too much detail on that, but it will be a really big feature, and once we have it, you will be amazed as how easy it will be to create a test plan with that. Regarding Wireshark, if you are interested in that as well, well, we have among the features that we are planning to add to it, we are planning to add support for dynamic response or dynamic traffic, so you can tune it to be able to answer or to behave in different scenarios, and not just one recording. I mean, you can add several recordings, and the mock will be more versatile, and will allow you to more easily test your mainframe application or to reproduce more cases. Those are like the general ideas that we have for Wireshark and the RTE plugin.
Thanks so much. I also see we have a few questions about BlazeMeter. Like I said, we'll answer those. I'll get back to you guys specifically on that, as this is less relevant, and we want to keep the focus on the mainframe and the RT plugin and Wireshark. So we do have another question. And I think this might be the last, so we can wrap it up, and I'll get back to the rest of the questions between Roger and myself in the coming days. So how would it manage the test in case we have expected results? For example, if we have an RTE test that executes a number of transactions, and we have a TXT file with a screenshot of what the return from the execution of each transaction should look like, can the script manage the validation? Can it compare the new result versus the expected result? How will it then be coded? And how will it be used in a multi-thread test? This is a few questions in one, so ending it with a bang.
Yeah, I don't know if I understood exactly the whole scope of the question, but I will try to answer it. I mean, I presented you with a post processor to extract some text from the screen. Each sampler or each iteration will run independently of the others, so you can extract a field on one iteration of the response for that iteration, and then later on use it on a subsequent sampler on that iteration. But other threads will be independent, so each extraction or each variable will be separate for each one, and the flow will be different for each one. It might be different for each one. It doesn't have to be. And I don't know. You can, as I mentioned to you, you can use the post processors and assertions to drive the flow in the way you want, and you can use the assertions to fail the test if some behavior is not the expected one. As I mentioned to you, I will advise you to, if possible, using the weights in the send keys and connect instead of using assertions, because they are usually more robust. And if they fail, so if they time out, if the condition is not reached after the given period, the sampler will fail. So it will behave similar to an assertion fail. So in general, yeah, you can use assertions to verify that the mainframe application is behaving as expected, or you can use the weights, and if they time out and the sampler fails, you can use that as well.
All right. Thank you so much. I just want to share my screen right now. Like I said, we're gonna, there are even some more questions coming in, but it's getting close to the hour, so we don't want to take too much of your of your time. And I want to say once again, thank you so much for Roger for presenting. We really appreciate it. So just a couple next steps that we have. Like I said, we're at BlazeMeter, you can create a free account, start testing, kind of showcase also what I know that Roger mentioned a little bit of the capabilities from how you can use it from as well. So that's great. We also have blogs and guides, including more information also about the RT plugin as well at our blog, and also about other interesting open source tools, JMeter, load testing, CI/CD, Selenium. We've got it all. And keep tuned and add a star, as you can see, to the GitHub links about the RTE plugin and Wiresham, and any news that we have also from the updates as well. We'll be happy to share with you all of the roadmap as well to keep you all tuned, and the great stuff. And we have all our previous webinars as well and other resources and at blazemeter.com resources. So once again, I want to say thank you to Roger for joining us. Thank you all for coming as well and listening. And like I said, those 10 seconds for the survey at the end would be amazing. Wishing you all a good rest of the day, and thank you all.